الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum Husna. Today, inshallah, we are nearing the end of this unit. The passives is what we have to study again, review, and we get even clearer on the subject. Inshallah, hopefully this will be a comprehensive study of the passives. The first thing I want you to know today is the title for passives is Al-Mabni Lil-Majhul. Say that for me. Right, so the past tense is called Madi, you knew that, right? Mm-hmm. And the present tense is called Mudari. So we say Al-Madi Al-Mabni Lil-Majhul or Al-Mudari Al-Mabni Lil-Majhul. Okay, so the past passive is Al-Madi Al-Mabni Lil-Majhul, and then the present passive is Al-Mudari Al-Mabni Lil-Majhul. Okay, you with me so far? Now, what is the purpose of a passive? Let's start at the basics, okay? So if I say, for instance, I studied. I studied. Let me make that bigger. And I say it was studied. Okay. The first sentence is active, al-ma'ruf. The second sentence is passive, al-majhul, al-mabni lil-majhul. Okay. Now let me tell you why that is. When we say a sentence is active, that what we're saying is there's a fi'l, there's an act, there's some kind of action, and you know who did it. So the action is studied, and what do you know? I'm the one who studied. I'm the doer of the act of studying. In a passive sentence, you also have an action, studying, for instance, but you don't know who did it. Like, that's the key to passives. You don't know who did it. You know the action happened, but you don't know who the culprit is, who the doer is. The doer becomes unknown. Okay? So when you say it was studied, or even if I said Arabic was studied, then you know that Arabic got studied, but what don't you know?
Studied it.
Who studied it? If I say Arabic was studied, then you don't know who the student was. You don't know if we're talking about ourselves or talking about somebody else. Okay? So when the doer is known, and this is really the only real way to tell if something is active or passive. When the doer is known, then you say it's active. It's ma'ruf. And when the doer is not known, then you say it is passive. Okay? So for example, I'll give you an example. I'll say it in Arabic or English first. Rome was dominated. And the question is this active or passive?
Passive.
This is passive. Why?
You don't know who dominated.
That's correct. That's the answer. And if I change this a little bit and I said Rome dominated.
Then
It's active. It's ma'ruf. Okay. Start using the Arabic terms little by little. Okay. So it's ma'ruf. Why?
because
You know the doer. You know the Rome did the act of dominating. Okay. So what if I said somebody asked me about the new campus. I say it's being worked on. It is being worked on. What do you think? It's mabni lil-majhul. Why?
Because you don't know the doer.
Put it clearly in regards to this sentence.
Okay. You don't know who's working on it.
That's right. You don't know who's working on it. If I say I'm working on it, or a construction company is working on it, then it becomes active. Okay? Similarly, if you say it was said, is that active or passive?
Passive.
It's mabni lil-majhul. Why? Good. So we're in this discussion, we're done with our first part. The first part is simply how do you basically define active as opposed to passive in any language, English, Arabic, it doesn't even matter. But that's just the first step. Okay. Now we're past the first step. Now we're going to take our second step. Okay. The second step is normally words are active. Normally words are active, and you should have the skill to be able to turn them into passive. Okay? So if I say, and this is again still just in English, we're not going to the Arabic yet. If I say, she, let's say taught. She taught. What's the passive version of this?
It was taught.
Actually, I'm going to say She was taught.
Okay.
Now, are they the same in meaning?
Mm-hmm.
No. They're certainly not the same in meaning. As a matter of fact, they are opposite in meaning. In one case, she's the teacher, and in the other case, she's the student. So what I'm trying to tell you is when you convert something from active to passive, you pretty much every time end up with the opposite meaning.
Okay.
Okay? So here she is the teacher, and here she is the student. Now, the question then arises, here in the first case, she's the doer. What's the Arabic word for doer? No, that's the status of the doer.
Door.
Inside, outside.
Fa'il.
Fa'il. She is the fa'il. Taught is the fi'il, and she is the fa'il. Now, in this second case, I can't actually say that she is the fa'il. Not quite. You're right. You're thinking in a good way, but we only use the word maf'ul when something's a detail. Technically, she's not even a detail. She is all we have.
Okay.
She's all we have. Like, details are extra stuff.
Yeah.
But she, in the sentence, she was taught, she was taught, she's not an extra thing. She's actually necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to come up with a new term for this. In the case of she taught, they call she the fa'il.
Okay.
In the case of she was taught, they call she the na'ibul fa'il. The what? Na'ibul fa'il. Na'ibul fa'il is all we have, because when something is passive, all you get is the thing that something was done to. You don't get the doer, you get the done to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the done to is called the na'ibul fa'il. Okay? So, for example, they worshipped is this the word they? Is that a fa'il or is that a na'ibul fa'il?
Fa'il.
Yeah, because they're the doer.
Mm-hmm.
What if I say Allah was worshipped?
Na'ibul fa'il.
Yep. The word Allah would then be a na'ibul fa'il. Okay? That clear so far?
Mm-hmm.
So now we've done our second task. Our first task was, okay, here's active, when you know the doer, and passive, when you don't know the doer. Our second step was, well, what's the difference between a fa'il and a na'ibul fa'il? And when you convert from active to passive, you basically get the opposite meaning.
Mm-hmm.
If someone was doing something, now that same thing is being done to them. He killed becomes what? He was killed. He struck becomes he was struck. You get it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now our third and final step in this conversation. Then we'll go to the Arabic in the next session. I just want you to get these concepts down first. Not everything can be made passive.
Okay.
Not every fi'il can be made passive. Okay? And this is actually a complicated conversation, so we're going to have to break it up. But really, the title of it is Not Everything Can Be Made Passive. Now, before I go to that conversation, once again, real quick. The first conversation was active versus passive and their definitions. What are the definitions of active and passive, and how do you say them in Arabic?
Active is ma'ruf.
Go ahead, ma'ruf.
And it means that you know who the doer is.
Who the doer of the fi'il is.
Mm-hmm. And passive is maf'ul.
Good.
And it's when you don't know who the doer is.
Okay, and our second conversation was when you convert active to passive, what happens?
The meaning gets switched around.
Right.
And
So give me an example.
Like she ate. Oh,
Okay, she ate.
She
And?
was eaten.
Because she was a chicken.
Sure.
Right? She ate, and unfortunately, she was eaten. Active versus passive. Our final conversation is, how do you know if you can convert something to passive? So for example, I'll give you an example. I learned, or I taught. Let's just keep that. What's the passive?
I was taught.
Okay. Easy enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's try this one then. I slept.
it's not. I said it's not.
It's not. Okay, how about, let me give you another one.
It was slept?
It was slept. That's English?
No.
Okay. How about this? I put to sleep. Like I put someone to sleep.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Passive?
No.
It's a different sentence altogether. I didn't make that passive. I'm still the doer. I put someone to sleep.
No.
What's the passive of the second sentence?
I was put to sleep.
I was put to sleep. Which means it's easy for you to take the I put to sleep and turn it into I was put to sleep. When I said I slept, you couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
What if I said I or he, let's say, he strengthened.
He was strengthened.
He was strengthened. He strengthened means he gave someone strength.
Mm-hmm.
He was strengthened means,
Someone gave him strength.
what about he informed?
He was informed.
Good. What about he knew?
He was taught.
No. I didn't say teaching. I said knowing. He knew.
He was. I don't know.
He was known.
Okay.
He was known. Simple. He saw.
He was seen.
Yeah, he was seen. He was seen. Get it?
Yeah.
Now, when can you not do it? I said, what about he slept? We couldn't do it. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
He stood. Can you try doing it? Can you do these?
He was sitting.
Okay, let's try that. Let's explore this. He was sitting. Now, the reason you put he was sitting is you figured every time we made something passive, we used the word was.
Which isn't true because they mean the same thing.
That's right, because how do you make something passive? You don't just make something passive by adding a was. That works sometimes.
Can't have the doer.
That's right, but in the case of he was sitting, you still know the doer. So this isn't passive. You know what that means? The fact that you're having a hard time making these passives is actually something natural because you cannot make these guys passive. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I put here, you can't make them passive. The question then is, how are you supposed to know quickly whether or not the word you're looking at can be made into passive? How do you know quickly? I mean, you could sit there and try to figure it out, but really, there is a pretty cool way in Arabic to tell immediately, and it works even in English. So we're just having the English conversation today. Okay? You pay attention?
Mm-hmm.
Want to fix your job?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm done twirling? Okay. Now, 2 words. Someone or something. Those 2 words are what? Someone or something. Okay. I'm going to put these words in a list again. He slept. What else? He stood. Stuck. He sat. He studied. He saw. He ate. And finally, he helped. Okay?
Okay.
All right. The question is, can you add the word someone or can you add the word something to this sentence? Just that one word, and it still makes sense. He slept someone. That doesn't make sense. He slept something. That doesn't make sense. You could say he slept on something, right?
Yes.
But even then, you had to add what word? On. Okay? Or he slept by something, right? So, without adding anything, just adding the word someone or something, does this make sense? No. What about he stood? He stood someone, he stood something. No, that doesn't make sense. What about he sat someone, he sat something?
No.
Nope. He studied someone or he studied something?
That makes sense.
That makes sense. He saw someone or he saw something?
Makes sense.
Okay, he ate someone or he ate something?
Makes sense.
At least one of them makes sense, right? Now, if you can add someone or something, those are the only kinds of words you can make passive.
Okay.
If you cannot add someone or something, those are the kinds of words you cannot make passive. What are the key giveaway words? someone or something. When I say, like if I ask you in the Quran, Allah says nazala or ata. Ata, which means he came. And I say, can I make this passive? What's the formula? How do you tell if you can make passive or not?
He came, someone came, something.
Which makes?
No, can't make it passive.
You can't make it passive. What if I say nazala? He came down. Like he descended.
He descended someone.
To come down someone, to come down something. Like he came down someone or he came down something. Does it make sense? Which means you cannot make this passive. Now finally, if I say anzala, you know what anzala means?
One?
No, that's anzara. We'll do that too.
Okay. And
Send down.
down.
He sent down. Is that passive? Can you make it passive? Why?
Because it says if you add someone or something.
He sent down someone, or he sent down something. All right. Anzara. What does it mean?
Warn.
Okay. Can you make it passive?
Warn someone.
That makes sense. He warned someone. He warned something. It's possible. He warned a cat. It's possible. So long as it's possible, you can make it passive.
Okay.
Let's recap and finish the session. The first thing I told you was, what's the definition of active? You know the doer. It's called ma'ruf. What's the definition of passive? Al-mabni lil-majhul. And you don't know the doer. The second was, how do you take an active and make it into a passive? Well, you take what used to be the doer and make that done to. Right? So you say he killed becomes he was killed. Now in the case of he killed, you have a fa'il, a doer. In the case of he was killed, what do you have? Do you remember the term? Good, na'ibul fa'il. Remember that. Okay, so in the case of he warned, you have a fa'il, he. In the case of he was warned, you have a na'ibul fa'il, he. He's the one being warned. So you have to be careful. Does adding was always work to make something passive? No. You have to look at whether or not it makes sense to make a word passive or not. And that was our final conversation. How do you know that a word you're looking at can be converted into passive?
By adding someone or something.
Good. You can add someone or something, and if you're able to add it, then this word is convertible. You can do it. And if you can't add it, then it's not convertible and you cannot do it. Okay? So we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu li wa laki. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.